Welcome to SkyTech-Nexus. I'm SKN, and today we're diving into how a single policy decision, U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs in 2018, sent shockwaves through North America. The Trump administration promised to revive American industry with tariffs, aiming to bring jobs back and put America first. But instead of a revival, prices soared, supply chains broke down, and Detroit's auto industry felt the pain. Canada, led by strategists like Mark Carney, didn't just retaliate, they pivoted, investing in clean technology and a new vision for trade. This isn't just about tariffs, it's about adaptation and the high-stakes chess match of modern industrial policy. We'll unpack how one decision triggered a chain reaction still reshaping our economy. Let's get started. It's 2018. The Trump administration imposes steep tariffs on imported steel and aluminum, aiming to protect American producers and revive the Rust Belt. Domestic steel companies cheered as stock prices jumped and hopes for a manufacturing renaissance soared. But for steel consumers, auto, appliance, and construction industries, the tariffs were a sudden tax. Costs for cars, planes, and even beer cans shot up overnight. Detroit's automakers faced a dilemma: absorb higher costs and lose profits, or pass them to consumers and risk sales. Supply chains built over decades were thrown into chaos. U.S. steelmakers couldn't instantly meet the demand for specialized grades. Shortages and delays rippled through factories, threatening jobs far beyond the steel mills. Economists warned, for every steel job saved, several more in manufacturing and construction were at risk. Inflation crept in as companies raised prices, and some even considered moving production overseas to escape rising costs. The policy meant to protect American jobs was now threatening them, pitting steelworkers against auto workers. The broader economy felt the strain, investment slowed, and the competitive edge of U.S. exports eroded. The tariffs, intended as a shield, became a cage. Companies reported lower earnings, and the very offshoring the policy aimed to prevent became a tempting escape. The stage was set for turmoil, and across the border Canada was preparing a very different response. While the U.S. built tariff walls, Canada saw an opportunity. Led by Mark Carney and government strategists, Canada pivoted to clean technology instead of a trade war. Their focus decarbonized steel production and leap ahead in the global shift towards sustainability. Electric arc furnaces powered by clean hydroelectricity replaced old blast furnaces, cutting emissions and costs. The government invested heavily, transforming Ontario's steel heartland into a hub for low-carbon manufacturing. Canada also protected its market with quotas and tariffs, shielding domestic producers during the green transition. The real genius? Canada weaponized its clean energy advantage, producing steel that was both green and cost-competitive. Made in Canada now meant made cleanly, a powerful selling point as global buyers demanded low-carbon products. Canada's green steel became a trade asset, especially as Europe and Asia moved toward carbon border taxes. While the U.S. clung to old models, Canada built the next one, using crisis as a catalyst for innovation and global leadership. The effects of this strategy were about to hit Detroit hard. Canada's pivot didn't just stay north of the border, it hit Detroit fast. U.S. automakers faced a double squeeze. Tariffs raised steel costs, while Canadian plants accessed cheaper, greener steel. Ford, GM, and Stellantis saw profits drop by billions, forced to choose between higher prices, lower margins, or cutting R&D. The playing field was now tilted against American workers. U.S. steelmakers couldn't meet the demand for advanced, specialized steel, causing shortages and production delays. Meanwhile, Canadian steelmakers invested in next-gen low-carbon products, perfect for electric vehicles and future mobility. Canada aligned its steel industry with the future, while Detroit was stuck fighting yesterday's battles. U.S. automakers, already struggling to transition to EVs, now faced even more headwinds as raw material costs soared. Canadian plants with stable green steel supplies gained a strategic edge. The U.S. system fractured under internal trade disputes, while Canada built a vertically integrated, future-proof ecosystem. Industry leaders in Detroit began to speak out. The tariffs were hurting more workers than they helped. The narrative of American manufacturing leadership was being challenged, not by a distant rival, but by Canada. The very policy meant to project strength was exposing vulnerabilities, letting a neighbor seize the high ground. With the U.S. market walled off, Canada launched a bold global pivot. The goal: diversify trade, reduce dependence on the U.S., and become a key player in the new green economy. Canada ramped up trade with the EU, marketing green steel as the answer to Europe's carbon regulations. They strengthened ties with Asia and Latin America, leveraging trade blocs the US had left behind. Made in Canada became a global brand, signaling quality, reliability, and sustainability. The North American supply chain, once seamless, began to split. Canadian steel that once flowed to Michigan now shipped to Rotterdam and Yokohama. The government actively supported exporters, opening new markets and steering industry toward profitable horizons. Canada's pivot showed that innovation and adaptation could outmaneuver tariffs. The US found itself increasingly isolated, while Canada built a global network of trade relationships. The long-term consequences. Canada modernized its industry and global standing while the US was left to reconsider its own place on the map. Behind the headlines, this is a story about people, workers, families, and communities. In the US, tariffs brought job insecurity to auto towns. Promises of revival faded as layoffs and hiring freezes hit. The policy pitted steelworkers against auto workers, fracturing solidarity and creating new divisions. The emotional toll was real: anxiety, fear, and the erosion of middle-class stability. In Canada, the green transition brought its own uncertainty, retooling, retraining, and fears of automation. Steel towns faced disruption but also a sense of purpose and optimism about building a future-oriented industry. The cross-border fallout strained relationships between workers in Windsor and Detroit, once united by shared employers and unions. The economic pain became cultural, eroding community bonds. The lesson: trade wars aren't just about numbers, they're about the real lives and futures of working people. So, what's the verdict? Was the US steel tariff a smart strategy or a self-made trap? The tariffs gave a short-term boost to domestic steelmakers, but at a huge cost to the broader economy. They raised prices, hurt manufacturers, and made American products less competitive globally. The policy protected one sector but damaged many others, shifting pain instead of solving problems. Canada's response, pivoting to green steel and new trade partners, was proactive and future-focused. The US risks being locked into an outdated, carbon-heavy model as the world moves towards sustainability. For every steel job saved, several more were lost in downstream industries. The tariffs fractured the workforce and undermined the very people they aimed to help. North American industry is now less integrated, with Canada forging its own path and the US facing a crossroads. The steel tariff saga is a lesson in unintended consequences. A policy meant to make America strong may have weakened its position and delayed its transition to the industries of the future. The real choice: build walls to protect the past, or invest in innovation to create the future. We've traced a single policy from Washington to Detroit and Ottawa, seeing how it reshaped economies and alliances. The steel tariffs are a lesson in strategy, foresight, and the risks of protectionism. The choices made now will define the jobs and technologies of tomorrow. Should the US double down on tariffs or pivot to a cleaner, more competitive model? Can Detroit catch up before long-term damage sets in? Do tariffs really help workers or just shift the pain? We want to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. If you found this valuable, like and subscribe for more deep dives. Thanks for watching. See you next time.